My name is Bhavya from Gumpa Road English Secondary Municipal School. I welcome you all for another session of History and Political Science. Today we are going to start chapter number 1, that is Sources of History. So students, look at the picture shown below. The one on the left shows a museum. Now a museum is a place where things discovered from the past are kept carefully. Have you ever been to a museum and wondered about the people who crafted the wonderful sculptures, paintings, and pottery kept there? Or have you ever gone for a trip to some old fort, like a picture on the right, and wanted to know more about the people who built and lived in those huge forts? So many times when you see or when you visit these places, you feel wanted to know about the people who built and you wanted to know about the history. So it is this desire, it is the wish to know more about those who lived before us, okay, that leads us to study history. Now, what is history? History is a written account of people, places, and events of the past. Okay, history is basically the written account of all the people, the places, or the events that happened in the past. It tells us how and where people lived, what they did, and what their customs and beliefs were. What were their traditions or customs, or what did they believe in? It also tells us the way they traded, means how the people carried on the trade, the wars which were fought, and the rulers who had governed them in the past. So history tells us, when we study history, we get to know all these things. So why do we study history? History shows how things are always changing. Life was different 200 years ago, and even more so 2000 years ago. So the life we are living today was quite different from the, if you could compare it from the 200 2000 years ago. So history studies these changes and the factors that caused these changes. History also teaches us many lessons. Like, for example, you can say when it tells us about how some people revolted, like they protested against the cruel thing, or the ruler like Adolf Hitler. It inspires us to, basically motivates us to fight against the cruelty or any kind of, you can say, injustice too. Similarly, it also shows us how during periods of peace, rich cultures, you can say, like any kind of ethical values, your traditional customs, the belief system that we have, or the political system or artifacts that we have, um, and which developed. So it also shows us how during periods of this peace, this rich cultures developed, and the beautiful works of art. You can say, like a very good painting, book, or piece of music they created. Now, today we are going to study the topic as the topic. Your topic is sources of history. So, in the last slide, we saw what is history and why do we study history. To, to study history, we need some sources. Okay, so sources, uh, that sources we are going to study in this particular chapter. A number of objects used by our ancestors still exist. So the number of objects, like our whatever our forefathers used to use, it is still existing. Some inscriptions. Now inscriptions, like you can say, words that are written on or cut on stone, brick, or you can say metal, etc. from the past have been recovered. So these some inscriptions have been recovered from the past. Okay, so inscription kind of materials have been recovered from the past. So you can say archaeological excavation, wherein the procedure by which the archaeologists they define, retrieve, and record cultural and the biological remains which is found in the ground. So some uh, some inscriptions were found from the past and it have been recovered. So sources like these help us to understand our history. History can also be learned through customs and traditions, like with different culture which we followed, which was followed in the past. We can learn from there, and you can also say folk arts. Folk arts, like in India, we have the Tanjore art, the Madhubani painting, Warli folk painting, Rajasthani miniature painting. So history can also be learned from this customs, traditions, folk arts, folk literature, like the fables, the folk tales, which is passed on from word of mouth through generation, as well as historical documents. Now, historical documents, you can say, they are the original documents that contains important historical information about a person, place, or event, and can thus serve as a primary sources as an important ingredient for historical methodology. So from this things also we learn history. All these are known as sources of history. They become a source to learn the history. Now till now, uh, we have studied the history of ancient, medieval, and modern India. Okay, so you all have studied about ancient history, whether it's related to Indus Valley civilization, which is the earliest known urban culture on Indian subcontinent, or about the Mauryans, which was found by Chandragupta Maurya, and the medieval in history, basically about the Mughal dynasty, which was found by Babur and then his successor. Then the Maratha state of Shivaji Chhatrapati, history of Shivaji Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and then modern history about the major battle of Panipat, and then the formation of Indian National Congress. So these were you all have studied the history in about ancient history, medieval and modern history. This year we have to study the history of India in the post-independence era. Post-independence means after independence. The sources of modern history are different from those of ancient and medieval history. So when the sources to study the modern history, it's quite different from ancient and medieval history. We can study history with the help of various sources like written sources, material sources, oral sources, and sources in the audio-visual medium. So we can study history with the sources like written sources, material sources, oral sources, and audio-visual medium sources. In modern period, we have to take note of various sources at the regional, means according to region, state, national, as well as international level. So in modern period, like today, we take a note of various sources related to region, state, national, as well as international level. Also, we can write history with the help of these sources. Now, coming to the first kind of sources, that is written sources. Now, what are written sources? Written sources are those which are in the form of written text. They are used by historians. Now, who are historians? Historians are the person who studies and writes about the past and is regarded as an authority on it. To reconstruct, to get a full description using the facts that are known, ancient, medieval, and modern history. Now, some examples of written sources that gives us information about history are newspapers, government gazettes, diaries, reference books, and official correspondence. Now, when it comes to written sources, we have newspapers, we have periodicals. Okay, periodicals, you can read kind of magazine published weekly, monthly, quarterly. Uh, uh, and then next under written source we have diaries. You can say that diaries written by the leaders like Mahatma Gandhi during India's independence. Then reference books with books of facts that we look to discover particular information about history. Then correspondence, correspondence. It can be like The letters by written by Mahatma Gandhi ji or Jawaharlal Nehru to his daughter Indira Gandhi. Then documents in the archives. Documents in the archives is basically the historical documents which are preserved in archives. Then government gadgets. Government gadget is a kind of periodical publication that has been authorized to publish public or legal notices. It is a legal document of Government of India. Then postage stamps. Then encyclopedia. Encyclopedia is a book or a set of books that gives information about many subjects arranged in order of alphabets. So these are all the written sources of history. Now you can see in the pictures also reference books. If you know want to know about the history India after Gandhi, you can refer this book about Vedas, or about the books on Chandragupta Maurya, about the partition, the making of India and Pakistan, the Royal Rajput. These are all the reference books. Then we have archives, the government gadgets, the postage stamps, and the encyclopedia. Then the periodicals. Okay, now I'll elaborate this written source, which is periodicals. Periodicals are magazines, you can say, or the scholarly journals. Scholarly journals, like it's written by scholars or professionals who are experts in their field. And there are also newspapers and newsletters. Newsletters is like printed or electronic report which contains news concerning the activities or business of an organization that is sent to its members, customer, employees, etc. So they are publications that are published at regular intervals. Daily newspapers, weekly magazines, and quarterly, like in 3 month journals, are all periodicals. Now, many periodicals are written for general audience, like normal audience whose readers are not expected to have specialized knowledge about particular field or training. We usually call these periodicals as magazines. However, probably even more periodicals are written for specialists and have articles that are difficult for readers who lack the background. Means the periodicals in the field of science, psychology, or history, or technology, where the readers with are written specially for specialists, wherein the readers are not aware of the background. So these periodicals are basically written for scholarly audience, like who spend a lot of time studying and having lot of knowledge about the academic subjects. They are called as journals. Now, how the periodicals are used for in history, or you can say historical research, which involves careful study and analysis of data about past events. Okay. Now, the chief advantage that magazines have over book is time. Information comes out more quickly in periodicals in comparison that in books. Oftentimes, an article that will eventually appear in book form originally appears in the article in a magazine or journal. So at the end, when it comes in the book, before that, originally beginning, it comes in the magazine or journal. Some disciplines, especially science and technology field, such as engineering, they basically rely on heavily on periodicals for the latest development in their rapidly changing fields. Results of the original research, which is done, are often printed in periodicals first. Reviews review of new books. Okay, you can say analysis of new books, works of art, and performance appears in periodicals. Often, the information contained in the periodical article will never appear elsewhere, either in book or other work. Now, periodicals often provide a good summary, a short description, information on a particular field. For a short research paper, information if there's a research done on particular topic, or if information from articles, it may be easier to manage than a lengthy book. So these were about periodicals as a written sources. Then the next, archives. Okay, now what are archives? Archives are basically is a collection of records. You can say the collection of historical documents. Okay, historical documents, you can say manuscripts, autobiography, the recordings, or diary or other source of information. Now, the term is also used for location in which these records are kept. Archives are made up of records which have been created during the course of an individual or organization's life. So these are the records, or you can say historical documents, which had been created when that individual was existing or organization is existing. In general, an archive consists of records which have been selected for permanent or long-term preservation. So the record or the historical documents which have been selected, they are selected to be permanently preserved there. Archives may also be generated by large organizations such as corporations and governments. Archives are different from libraries in that archives hold records which are unique. Okay, they're not similar to libraries. They're quite different as they preserve historical documents which are unique. Now, person who works in archives, are called as archivists. And the study and practice of organizing, preserving, and providing access to information and materials in archives is called as archival science. Now, the place where historical documents are preserved is called archives. Now, the main office of the National Archives of India is located at New Delhi. This is the largest, you can say, among the archives in Asia. Then we move on to next kind of written sources, that is encyclopedia. Now, encyclopedia is basically a reference work or a compendium, which is a short or complete account of a particular subject, especially information of a book. They provide summaries, short description of knowledge, either from all branches or from a particular field or discipline. Now, this encyclopedia divided into articles or entries that are often arranged alphabetically by article name and sometimes by thematic. Thematic means which is connected to subjects or subject categories. Encyclopedia entries are longer and more detailed than those in most dictionaries. Generally speaking, unlike dictionary entries which focus on linguistic information means connected with language about words such as etymology, means the origin and history of particular word, meaning, pronunciation, use, and grammatical forms. Encyclopedia articles focus on factual, okay, based on true or real information concerning the subject named in the article's title. Now, this encyclopedia is a written source. They have been existed for around 2,000 years, okay? And they have evolved considerably, like developed considerably during that time as regards developed in regards to language, means it's written in major international like German, French, Chinese, and vernacular languages as well like Hindi, Tamil, Bengali, Gujarati. The size there are few or the encyclopedias are there in volumes also, like volume one, volume two, three, and series going on. Then the aim, the presentation of intent means the presentation of there is presentation of global, worldwide, or a limited range of knowledge. The cultural perspective, that authoritative, having authority, ideological means they have information, particular set of ideas, dictating to teach people moral lessons, and utilitarian, that practice on practical authorship. Their like journal editors, qualification style, leadership, the people who read particular books, newspaper, magazines, education level, background, interest, capabilities. There's a lot of changes that has been in 4 years in encyclopedias in regards to this, and technology which is available for production and distribution. Like there are handwritten manuscripts, like old book documents, small or large prints runs internet as a valued source. Okay, it's a very valuable source, you can say, which is reliable, that you can trust, which is information compiled by experts. Printed versions found at prominent, like important places. You can find it in libraries, schools, and other educational institutions. Then the National Archives of India, which is discussed, that is the largest among the archives in Asia. So The National Archives of India is a repository. Repository means it's a storage, okay, of non-current records of Government of India. Non-current means not the current one, of Government of India, and holds them in trust for the use of administration. It was set up in March 1891. Okay, so the National Archives of India was established in the month of March 1891 in Calcutta, that is Kolkata, of Department of Culture as the Imperial Record Department. It was established there, and then subsequently it was shifted to New Delhi in 1911, following the shifting of national capital. Now, the National Archives of India is an attached office in the Ministry of Culture. Ministry of Culture basically was the in charge with preservation and promotion of art and culture in India. So it is an attached office to Ministry of Culture. It is a central repository of non-current records of